Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the BASRaT AGM 2022. It looks like those of you that are joining us this evening have all done so now, because I can't see the number going any further. So we'll get things underway. Just some housekeeping before I pass you over to the committee. The content of this evening's AGM is for viewing by BASRaT members only. So if we could ask you to refrain from taking any screenshots, pictures or videos, that would be particularly helpful. We will be recording it and making it available to members through the members area of the website. So please don't worry, if there is content you want to refer back to, you'll be able to do that. We have audited the registrants for tonight's webinar as well, so it should be BASRaT members only that have been able to get into the session. If you are a non-BASRaT member and you've somehow managed to find your way in, the session is for BASRaT members only. So if we could ask you to leave, that would be great. Thank you. If you do have questions, we're taking those via the Q&A section down at the bottom rather than the chat. So please do use the Q&A. You can also view the questions that have already been posted. And if somebody's thinking the same thing as you, you can upvote that question to bump it to the top. So we'll take those in popularity order as we get to the end, or if there's something that's particularly time pressing, we'll take that straight away and I'll monitor those as we go through. Once we get to the end, into the specific Q&A session, we'll be using the raise hand function, and we can make you temporarily a panelist, so you can come on and actually chat to us with your question. I will hand you over to our secretary, Holly White, and then we'll get things underway. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ollie. So it falls to me just to do the official and formal welcome from the Executive Committee to this evening's proceedings. If we could go to the next slide, there will be an overview of the plan. So Ollie's in charge of next slide, please. Thank you. So we will go through for approximately 45 minutes of Executive Committee reports, and you can see the order that we plan to go through those in. There may be a slight little bit of jumping around, but we hope to stick to that order. And we will finish the evening with the announcement of some student awards and prizes, and then there will be time for questions and answers at the end. Could I have the next slide, please, Ollie? So my update this year is the business of the AGM, if you like, and we considered re-election to Executive Committee officers. So as you will have received, the membership were notified of the requirement to nominate candidates for the vacant roles, and unfortunately, we didn't receive any nominations. So what that means for this year is that our quality officer, accreditation officer and student liaison officer were happy to restand, and the executive committee were happy to accept the three people, Chris Wilcox, Richard Moss and John C. Ashton, to continue to fulfil their roles for their second term in our new governance model. Another piece of news for you is another piece of good news. The lay executive committee members, Dr. John Morgan and Dr. Richard Collins, are happy to stay on to complete their second term for us as well. So that's the main business of the AGM. A little call to action from me. Obviously, we didn't receive any nominations for the executive committee roles. I think we are taking steps towards having new faces in the committee with our link officers. However, if you are sitting there thinking about any specific barriers, I would love to hear about them. So please do either ask a question or pop a comment so that we can hear that. We are open to making that process easier if we are creating a barrier to anybody who would be interested. I will hand on to the next slide, and I am handing on to Alan.
Thanks, Hall. Pop us straight on to the next slide, please, all. Thank you. So just a quick overview in terms of where we're going to be for my report. The first bit will be around the CPD audit and just a few updates that are coming down the track with that, and just a couple of wider updates with from the chair sort of side of things, and things that have been going on in the background as well that people may or may not be aware of. So if you can pop us on one, please, all. Thank you, mate. So the audit this year, which was for 21-22, that was completed. In fact, there is a typo there. I did mess that up, Holly. It was 2021. I did say that wrong. Sorry. So that should be 2021, as in 2020, 2021. That was completed earlier on the year. There were 19 people chosen for audit. Couple of sort of flags from that were that 3 people have actually failed to complete the portfolio at this point in time. And unless that is completed prior to January or prior to renewal, then they won't be able to renew the registration until they can actually prove that they've completed their CPD. That will actually be changing going forward as well, which I'll be talking about in a moment. There were also 2 referrals from the previous year, which should be 1920, because I've completely messed up my dates, because there was some maternity leave, so they referred their previous year's audit to this one, so that they had a chance to then catch up, obviously, on doing some CPD in that particular time period. One of those members didn't renew, and the other one had actually gone through and completed the audit, so that's been fine. One thing which is just a common theme over the last few years really is that the majority of those who actually sent something in required some sort of resubmission, purely because they hadn't completed the portfolio properly, hadn't done a full portfolio and sort of reflections, etc. And that's been part of the reason that we've led to some of the updates that we're going to talk about now. So we can pop us across, please, all. So a bit of an update in terms of what we're going to be looking at from a CPD requirements perspective. It's not a huge update in terms of any changes massively. It's the portfolio that's going to be slightly changing, but just a little bit more clarity really in terms of what this looks like going forward. So basically there'll be 3 requirements that the portfolio that registrants send on to us for audit that will be required to meet. So those 3 requirements are up on the screen there. So maintaining an up-to-date, continuous and accurate record of the CPD activities, which will obviously be judged at their audit. Engaging in a variety of CPD activities, so they must come from at least 2 different categories each year. And the aim there is that they have to reflect the current practice of the GSR, and also the future practice that they may then be sort of working towards, and obviously the needs of those who they work with, i.e. their service users. And then finally, to ensure that their CPD actually contributes to improvement in their practice of the GSR. So part of that comes from the reflection that they'll undertake, as to reflect on each activity that they complete, but also a bit more forward planning as to what kind of CPD they're going to start to look at doing, and what they're going to be sort of working on, and trying to work out maybe areas for improvement or that can improve their practice going forward. In terms of the annual audit, that will stay exactly as it is now. So basically, members are eligible for audit every 2 years. That's dependent on date of graduation. So for a member who graduated in 2020, their CPD will then run for the remainder of 2020, because obviously that's only 6 months or so, then through 21 and 22, and they will then be audited or potentially audited in the January of 23, taking that forward. So that will then be their period. The following period then will actually run from January 2023 through to December 2024. So it depends on the graduation year, and then that sort of follows and links in with that. Each year there will be roughly 50% of members are eligible for audit, because that's roughly how sort of things work out in terms of graduation years. And 5% of those eligible members are then chosen for audit, and that's just randomly chosen for audit, and then they're contacted from there. Next slide, please, all. So we tightened up and looked at the portfolio requirements a little bit to try and make this a little bit more specific and a little bit more clear, and to try and help people submit a relevant and appropriate portfolio right from square one. So there will be sort of 5 parts to it. The first part will be looking at role summary. So during the audit period, so if that was 21-22, then what were the roles that they were undertaking during that period? What were their specific occupational roles as such, and what were they doing in that period? Just a summary to then be able to understand how the CPD fit with that. Then there'll be the CPD portfolio. So basically within that, there will be a list of the CPD activities that were undertaken in that period. So just nice and simple. There doesn't have to be a reflective summary on each separate CPD activity, just a list of those activities that were undertaken. And then The next step is then a reflective summary. So basically looking at how did that CPD that's been undertaken as detailed, how did that actually meet the required standards that were outlined in the previous slide? So those 3 required standards. So how was it continuous? How did it sort of relate to their current role? How did it relate to future? And then how did that potentially improve their practice as a GSR? And then the final section, in terms of a written section, is actually following on from that. What is the plan for future CPD? So actually trying to get registrants to think about what they need to do in future. Maybe that's for future occupational roles, or what weaknesses or areas might they have recognised that need to be improved. And they'll take that forward. And then what's the plan for future CPD to try and take that and be a little bit more informed really in what they're aiming to do. And then the final part there is the supporting evidence. So what supporting evidence might you have? So that may be certificates of attendance if you've gone on particular CPD courses. It might actually be a reference to a podcast that you might have looked at. There's not going to be evidence for absolutely everything, as you know, professional conversations that you might be having. You might not be able to evidence that, but the discussions and sort of a summary of the discussions that you had might fit in with the details of the CPD activities there. So that will be sort of dealt with on an individual basis as such, but that's what we'll be looking for. So that's a general sort of overview of what that portfolio will actually look like. Now, it's worth pointing out with that's actually going to be a bigger requirement from our end at BASRaT to actually review those and actually look into those and provide what they need to make sure that's good going forward. On to the next slide, please. So the final little bit, it's just a couple of other updates around what's been going on, sort of from myself and also from other members and members of BASRaT and registrants that have been happening over the last sort of year or so. So exactly this time last year, I was at the IOC conference representing BASRaT there. Steve Aspinall was also supposed to come, but there was, unfortunately, I think either he or his wife had COVID, unfortunately, at the time, so he couldn't travel with us, which was a good job in terms of the accommodation that he booked at the time, but there you go. So it was a good, really good couple of days, some really positive conversations with members of YFAT, NATA, CATA, and also with the RFU, which actually leads on to something a little bit further down. And also it was nice to see a couple of parts of representation of sport rehab from Craig Barden and Gemma Parry, who were presenting some research at the conference as well, which was really good. Obviously a worldwide sort of stage for them to be actually representing BASRaT and sport rehab, which was great. I'm currently at Therapy Expo today and tomorrow, and there's been a number of speakers who've been representing sport rehab there, and probably the most that have ever been seen at Therapy Expo. So that's been really good to see, and I've heard some good feedback already from a couple of the talks as well, so that's been really nice. There was the RFU and FIA, the Football Association of Ireland medical standards changes as well. So the Football Association of Ireland have actually recognised sort of sport rehab / athletic training as it is in Ireland within their medical standards, which has been a really positive change. And the RFU have also changed some of their standards that now doesn't require a physio to lead a team. There just needs to be a physio on their staff. So actually rehabber can now go in and lead teams within RFU clubs, which has been obviously a really positive change as well. Just a couple of other little things. The NATA meeting over in Philadelphia was brilliant. Again, meeting with our worldwide partners and some really positive conversations. So myself and Steve were attending there. And then we had the BASRaT Aware Day as well, where we looked at our link officers brought some presentations from their key areas, which generated some really good discussion and some good action points to go forward with that we're now sort of looking to try and improve. So we basically looked at current state of play, any threats, priorities and actions in each area, and there's been some really positive discussions and actions in that as well. So some really good stuff been going on over the last sort of 12 months or so, and I'm sure Stephen will be, maybe possibly all, but I think Oliver's going to sort of try and keep his relatively short. Steve will be touching on a few more areas of that as well. So that's everything from me for now. So obviously if anybody's got any questions at the end, then happy to take them.
Al, just before I pass it on, Al, there is a question in the Q&A that you may as well take now, specific to CPD. If you graduated in 2022, does that mean you'd possibly be audited in 2025? So essentially, what's the first period you're eligible for audit if you're?
Yeah, first period of audit. So obviously you've got the rest of 2022 and that'll be 23-24, which means a renewal in the January 25 will be when you're first then eligible for audit.
Thanks.
No problem.
Pass it over to me. Great, thanks, thanks Al. So my name's Adam Naylor. I'm the Institution Liaison Officer. There's only a brief report from me, to be honest. So I'll just introduce the role. Basically, I just provide relationships with education providers where we can chat with teams within different institutions and look at how we can support those teams in different ways, look at best practice, how programs are being taught with the educational framework. For future goals is to look at where there are sort of collaborative advancements in things like, again, the way programs are structured or the way particular topics are taught or future research projects. So that's the sort of role in a nutshell. If we move forward, please. So we've had a growth in numbers of programs. So we now have quite a far reach from moving into Scotland. I think Rich, our accreditation officer, will talk a little bit about some of the reach across the programs, but essentially we've got a range of teaching teams from different proportions of clinical staff per team. And again, it's basically to try and get a picture of the challenges faced across these different programs across the country, and then we can provide support in the appropriate way where teams may need that. Can we move forward again, please? Good. So just off the back of when we established this role just about a year ago, we brought forward some common themes with program goals. So you can see those on the screen there. So those are the key things that we're kind of working with on a continual basis. They seem to be generally common across the different programs, a lot of the same points that program leads would raise and the staff involved with the program. So where there are particular issues or things that, again, we try to support with, then we can deal with that on an individual basis. And that tends to, at the moment, just come as and when things are arising, and then we need to provide some sort of support. Move forward onto the next slide. So there's a few challenges that programs face. So key things like student expectations and graduate employability, obviously key things that line up with the industry as well. So where we can then make clear links with our student liaison officer, myself, and then our link officers in the way that the workplace is being shaped, then again, we could try and bring that information to the students on the programs and the program teams as well, in order to help paint that larger picture of what that career projection looks like. Of course, you can see on the screen there's a few different challenges. Again, some of it's institutionally driven, some things that we can support with from a BASRaT perspective, but again, sometimes it's a sounding board or trying to also offer some information that we know is different in other institutions. So some of it, again, is troubleshooting, problem solving as we move forward. Final slide from me. If we go to the next one, please, is just some aims for 22-23. There's just the 3 key areas identified. We've got some new institutions starting with their initial intake. So it's how we provide some program support alongside the growth of the student body within those institutions. And there, alongside the staff, is where we could look at the models that would then work in the current climate of how higher education is being structured and supported, I'd say, from different institution perspectives. So again, it's going to be very different across the country. And it's how we, again, provide that support for each one. From a placement perspective, this is a challenge which just continues and probably will continue forever. It's just, again, how we try and bring as much opportunity for our students to gain experience and for programs to meet the educational framework requirements as well. So looking at quality placements and maybe how those placements are structured so that students gain the education and the practicalities of being in the workplace as much as possible. It's also helping to try and support growth of the placement opportunities in different areas of the country, especially where there's new programs starting to develop. So again, where we can support the growth areas there through our link officers, that then again ties together multiple personnel within our executive committee and link committee. So that's a brief rundown from me. I think that's me from there. You can pass me forwards.
Evening, everyone. I'm Ryan Gordon. I'm the Administrator and Education Coordinator. Ollie, if you go on to the next slide, please. I know Steve will be touching on this a little bit later on, but one of the main introductions that we've had over the last 12 months is the addition of the registration exam. And it's the first year that we've had the final year students take the registration exam before being eligible to join the register. So far, we've had 296 applicants, and so far 71% of those have passed the registration exam. So it is, whilst it's in its first year and transition period of introducing this, it is showing its sign to help ensure minimum competency and safe practice for those either initially joining or joining after a period of lapse. If we go on to the next slide, please. With the registration numbers, it has slightly impacted compared to this time last year with the introduction and those students having to take it, as 28% failed their either test or retest so far. But the numbers are still strong, numbers are still high, which is really good. And there's still continuous growth, especially on the student side, as we introduce a few more cohorts being accredited this year, which is great. Next slide, please. And one of the main things as we come towards the renewal periods, it's just important to make sure that all the personal information and documentation is up to date on your membership pages. If you are working in private practice, then please make sure you do include your details, as members of the public can use the Find a Practitioner function. And it's always useful for you to keep all your details up to date. From a CPD point of view, I know Alan's touched on it a little bit already, but you can upload all your CPD, whether it's certificates or reflective reviews, onto your membership profile. So please make a little bit more use of your membership page, as we also start to introduce the Moodle platform, learning platform, which will be rolled out hopefully early next year for registrants, getting a few more CPD points and guidance on that going forward. And that's all for me. Oh, last little bit. Another good point is that registration prices cost has remain the same for next year. So as we come towards the end of December, start of January, we will be opening up the renewal applications. So if you're paying by direct debit, that will continue only if you renew before the end of January. If you are paying in full, then you can do that through the normal platform by logging into your account and proceeding through the registration renewal platform. And if you do have any questions about your membership or unsure on how to renew your registration, please don't hesitate to get in touch.
Hi guys, I'm going to take over from Ryan. Thanks, Ryan. So I am the Student Liaison Officer, and over the last few years I've been working to try and improve student engagement. Part of that was to bring the students in as members, which they weren't before. So if we go to the next slide, please, all. So just a breakdown of the numbers. We've currently got 21 institutions across the UK, 20 of those with undergrad sport rehab courses and 6 postgrad MSc courses, or MSci, which is an integrated master's. And overall, we've got just under 1,500 active student members within our membership base. That means we can communicate with students directly, which historically we've always done through kind of program directors, so that makes it much easier to contact students and for them to get in touch with me. Part of that has been I've been dealing with direct kind of queries and things from students, but we've been getting out a lot of information to students, which I think has helped us continue to bring people in as full registrants and get that working a bit better. The main objective for me for the next year or so is to continue to improve student engagement, continue to deliver the student conference virtually, which has been a bit more of a success than it has previously, which when we've done it in person. And part of that is trying to help the students get a better idea of what is available out there when they do graduate, whether that's through working, through different jobs, different opportunities that are available, but also some online kind of workshops and stuff as well that we've been able to deliver online. I have been doing some data collection, which I'll talk about in a moment, but lots of kind of communication with the students, as I said before, signposting to different opportunities, and being a point of contact for students, which a few of them have been in touch. So if we go to the next slide, so part of the data that I've been collecting over the last few years is about further intentions for study. As we know, a lot of our students do go on to further study, and a big chunk of that in the past couple of years has been to physiotherapy, which obviously is their choice. And this past year, if we think about the cohort that's just gone, was the kind of first COVID lot. So an even bigger chunk of those are intending to go on to further study in physiotherapy, a good chunk of those into strength and conditioning, and some of those into those other categories as well. That is just their intentions at their point of graduation. So how that changes, I'll collect that data as well. When we looked at employment, then again, the largest chunk of where people intend to go is into sport and into the NHS, where the opportunities are available, which are becoming more and more abundant, which is excellent. And I would like to provide better clarity on where the other sectors are so that we can build upon that in the future. So that's where we're at the moment. If you go to the next slide, I will move on to the next bit as well. So over the past 6-7 months, we have been building what we've called the Link Committee, which is people from industry, so in various different parts. We've been looking at corporate, musculoskeletal, we've been looking at sport, we've been looking at private practice, and we've been looking at military and NHS, which we're still recruiting for. If anyone is here who is currently working in the military or in the NHS, and would like to be involved in the committee, I can have a chat to you about that and what that involves. But about 6 months ago, we recruited Gemma Parry and Dave Hartley into our kind of sport specialist area for the Link Committee, and those two have been doing some work on a project about youth athletes and safeguarding. We've brought Danny Barnes in as our kind of specialist in private practice, and we've brought in Serena and Zoe from our corporate MSK point of view. So if we go to the next slide, Ollie, and this is kind of the actions that we've been working on with the Link Committee. First of all, as I said, Gemma and Dave are working on the education and problems in working with youth athletes, coaches and their families, and safeguarding. And from the corporate point of view, we have been looking at how to address the availability or recruitment of people to work with insurance companies and to address the barriers there. As part of that, we have written a survey which will be sent out shortly, just to gather some data that we will need to be able to address these barriers in the insurance world. So when that does come through, if we can ask that you all complete it as soon as you can, there will be multiple reminders and that will go out to the whole registering base. That will go out to everyone that's registered. So if you could complete that, that would be excellent, and that will provide some extra information for us, some extra ammo really to kind of tackle the insurance issues which people ask about all the time. The next slide, please, Al. So the aims of the next year is to continue to work in these sectors, recruit for the military post and the NHS post, and continue to support people going into those sectors by increasing industry awareness of us as a profession, but also to kind of link with people in the industries and get our name out there. And with that, we will continue to provide as much information as we can about what's going on in the industries, the different industries and different sectors. That's me. Thanks all.
Right, good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know, my name's Richard Moss. So I'm the accreditation officer, and I lead the accreditation team, which is made up of a few different people from across the country. And we look at the accreditations of higher education courses in sports rehab. So if you move on for me, Ollie. The first kind of area of practice for us is that we look after a document called the Educational Framework. Now, for most of you, this wouldn't be something you come across very commonly, but if you do work in a university, it's essentially a document which outlines all the content that we require of institutions to deliver as part of an accredited program. So that document itself is currently sort of going through a bit of an update, and that will actually be the 12th edition of that document that we've created over the last few years. So it has moved forward quite rapidly, and I think reflects the speed of the development really of the profession, kind of going forward. If you move forward from where the other kind of process we have that goes alongside accreditation is what we call the annual review of standards. So this is currently going to its 10th year, and essentially is a process where we audit the educational institutions and we look at some of the regulations that we have, but also kind of just to check in with institutions to see if there's anything we can help with, and try to look at where there's developments in the programs themselves. It's partly to support the institutions themselves, but also to look from our point of view about any kind of drift away from the content that we originally look at and accredit. So it's a useful process that we complete at 2 points through the year, so at the end of each semester, for each institution that's accredited with us. All right, move on for me, Ollie. So a quick kind of overview really of what we've been doing. Within the accreditation team, it's getting busier and busier every year. Obviously, as we grow the number of institutions we have, that obviously in itself is a bit of a workload that goes with our job. But equally, as we then get more numbers that come through the accreditation process and then re-accredit, obviously that's a larger number to look at each year. So it is getting quite busy, and particularly coming off the back of the COVID pandemic, we are now starting to sort of catch up with some accreditations which were extended because of that sort of disruption. So there's a bit of extras catching up to do through some institutions. But we have been busy, I say, this last year. At the moment, there's currently one institution that are looking at a brand new course, which will be seeking accreditation in the future. We've got 4 new programs that have joined us over the last year, including our first one, as Adam mentioned earlier on, up in Edinburgh. So we're really pleased to have an accredited program north of the border at Queen Margaret's. There's 3 institutions which we've granted a 1-year extension to, just to kind of allow them time to actually redevelop their programs within their institutions. We've had one which have successfully re-accredited, and looking forward to the new year, we're expecting about 11 institutions to be re-accrediting, and a further 5 have expressed an interest in looking at a new BASRaT accredited program for the future. So if you move on to the next slide for me, Ollie. So just to kind of round things up really for me, the aims for what we're going to look at next year obviously is to continue that accreditation process. As I said, it is getting busy, so that'll be quite a large chunk of what we do, both for the kind of new programs, but also the re-accrediting of current programs. And then the updating of the educational framework is probably the other big job really for this coming year. So that'll be looking at the regulations we currently have in there, the content we have in there, and just adding a few extra bits and pieces in to sort of tidy up and tighten up some of the wording. So that's kind of our plans really for the next year. That's all from me.
Hi everyone, my turn. My name's Ollie Coburn. I'm the registrar and I'm presenting on behalf of myself and Chris Wilcox. We work quite closely together and essentially share the same set of responsibilities from the registrar perspective. Chris assists me with the fitness to practice processes and all the policies and standards that sit alongside that. In 2022, we've had one fitness to practice case that went to investigation and no sanctions were imposed following that investigation. With regards to updates around the policies and standards, there have been some changes to fitness to practice processes. The new guides are now published on the website. You can access those in the members area. The significant changes to acknowledge within that are some additions that we've made to cover the introduction of the registration exam and people's standards of conduct and behaviour whilst undertaking the exam. We've also introduced a new online raising a concern form, in addition to updating and still keeping the traditional form, which is a Word document format. There haven't really been any other guidance and policy updates, but we've still, of course, been extremely busy. From a PSA perspective, our accreditation renewal has gone smoothly. We continue to meet the standards, including the new updated standard 1, which Steve may or may not give more information on later, but there was a significant amount of work from the committee that went into meeting the new standard 1 and providing the evidence that was needed in order to do so. So that was a significant achievement on behalf of everybody. We've continued to undertake various pieces of influencing and policy work with ARMA, the Community Rehab Alliance, and other groups, both nationally and internationally. And of course, that will continue as well into 2023. Some key projects or initiatives to update you on from the PSA perspective. The PSA have very recently, this week, drafted a policy paper regarding VAT and the exemptions for VAT. That will go to the Department of Health for their review and then on to HMRC, hopefully with the outcome of revisiting VAT legislation to widen the exemption for healthcare services to include those on accredited registers, which will of course include you guys as BASRaT registrants. The other thing PSA supporting with is insurance. There's going to be a joint letter very soon going to the ABI, which is the Association of British Insurers, of which all the big PMI companies are members. So it's hoped that by gaining an understanding with the umbrella body, the ABI, we can then use that information when making approaches to insurance companies. There are also 2 significant PSA consultations at the moment that may lead to changes for our registration processes and what we need to do and the information that we need to ask you for. And they're around safeguarding and equality, diversity and inclusion. The safeguarding changes, in a nutshell, surround access to enhanced DBS checks. It may become a requirement for accredited registers to request enhanced DBS checks at the point of registration and re-registration, only where that doesn't take place already through an employer. That's not a certainty. The consultation is currently live and accepting responses, and will of course update everybody after the conclusion of that consultation. Similarly with EDI, I think the biggest changes that you may notice as registrants is increased data collection from BASRaT around protected characteristics. You shouldn't notice anything too many other things that are different with registration processes and impacts on you, but please do be aware that there's going to be a significant amount of work done by BASRaT and the PSA with regards to EDI over the next year or 2. And it may be that a new standard is introduced for accredited registers that keeps us accountable for that work. I have no other updates for you as part of my registrar's report, but obviously I am happy to take questions from anybody on email or wherever else you manage to get hold of me. So please do feel free to send them because I'm always happy to chat.
Hi guys, I'm John Morgan. I'm one of the lay members of the committee who is pleased to see quite a few attendees who I've previously worked with, and I hope you're all well. The next slide, please. And the next slide, please. Basically, I sit on committee in order to appraise from a members and registrants point of view how well the committee are actually performing in their decision-making process, making sure that things are fair, inclusive, and everything is as above board as it can be in their decision-making process. So basically, my summary in my report that will be on the website going forward is that this year I found that the committee approach to be inclusive. All members are encouraged and valued to express their opinions, both at meetings, by email, and on the frequently used WhatsApp group. The expertise and balance of the talent within the committee is extremely good for us to form a good decision-making process, with quite a few members playing devil's advocate at times in order to come to the right conclusions. The level and intensity of the discussion and strong chairpersonship from Alan combined to make the decision-making process very objective and fair. The decisions are invariably arrived at through a very factual analysis of information, reflecting on the progress, and always with the interests of members and our service users placed at the heart of the process. Processes and documentation are clear and concise. Accurate minutes are kept, and those minutes are always reviewed at the start of subsequent meetings. Decisions carried forwards to future meetings are always thoroughly reviewed before a discussion about those continues. I find the committee very cohesive, hardworking, realistic, honest, and well balanced. Finally, the addition of the link committee members who are obviously passionate about their chosen profession has added a new and vibrant attitude to committee discussions, and I would encourage the any attendees of the meeting to sort of put their hands up if you can, involved in the military and the NHS, to put yourselves forward as for the vacant link committee member posts, because it does add a lot to committee discussions. And that's about it from me. Thank you. I don't know whether Richard's here or not, but I'll.
Thanks, John. Yeah, unfortunately, Rich wasn't able to join us this evening, but I think we can leave his points up there on screen for a minute or so, just for people to have a quick read of, and they'll obviously be present in the recording then as well.
Okay, good evening. This has probably been one of the most kind of stressful and time-pressured years we've had in our history, but also probably one of the most exciting years we've actually had as well. Could we have the next slide, please? Just a couple of very simple and quick updates, first of all. The neuro rehab kind of educational package that we put together were finished earlier this year. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we really struggled to actually kind of get them all set up so you can access them. At the moment, we're trying to actually kind of get all our kind of Moodle platform set up, but if as we get into December, we're still struggling with that at the moment, because there's quite a lot of work we need to do for the size of the material kind of putting up there. One of the things we'll do in the meantime is actually get them up on the BASRaT website so you can access them via your member area. So those are, as I say, they're all waiting to be uploaded now. They are behind, but it's something we really struggle to have time to just get everything kind of up and finalised. But they should be up there, as I say, for this new year. And they are absolutely excellent. Loads of stuff on there, loads of kind of patient videos, loads of patient perspectives, loads of ideas you can use in a wide variety of kind of rehab settings as well. So that should be pretty cool when we get that done. Next slide, please. The international arrangements is obviously kind of something we've been chatting about quite a lot. You've seen lots of kind of news coverage about this. It's a really kind of big deal for our profession. You know, we're very unlike any of the other healthcare professions really in the UK. in that there's pretty much no one who has such an easy kind of access to different countries like the United States, where you can get licensed in individual states just by sitting one examination once you've gone through that kind of process. And we've now had a number of our members actually kind of going through the processes for kind of Canada and the United States as well. And hopefully, obviously, kind of one of the big things we're aiming for is that this is going to expand and become a lot more global. And there's a number of countries in Europe and around the world who are really kind of working towards this. So hopefully over the next decade, we'll see, you know, kind of a big growth in our international profession, where we really are, you know, kind of one profession, you know, kind of one base kind of core curriculum, and that will help support us in everything we do. For example, you know, the international arrangement partners, we're obviously kind of approaching organizations like the World Health Organization. We're working with the international Olympic committees as well. And we're obviously trying to get recognition from a global perspective, not just from a country perspective. And the exam is really, really going to help with that. And it's changed the way we practice, really, and hopefully it will change the way we go forwards and develop as a profession, help us evolve in the best way possible, both for your own interests as a professional kind of practitioner and clinician, but also as well for helping to keep kind of members of the public safe. And how we develop as a profession, you know, is very, very linked in to what's happening kind of globally as well. We all have the same goals, and we're able to share our expertise and obviously kind of work together to make sure, you know, this changes our profession locally and internationally. So incredibly, incredibly exciting. It really is. Can we have the next slide, please? Just when I was thinking about what we're going to chat about tonight, there's a huge list we could kind of put up of all the things we've actually kind of been doing. But it made me think a little bit about our journey over the last 2 decades. And I think 2 decades ago, we used to sit in kind of coffee shops in service stations or motorways. And we used to kind of write out plans for a professional membership association, you know, and our ideas that could kind of help maybe form a profession. And just over 2 decades later, you know, we now are a regulated profession, and we cover so many different areas. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't seem to realize. You know, most kind of organizations in this country cover one of these areas only, or maybe 2. We have to cover all of them. And we do this with the help of kind of volunteers, but from a staff perspective, we don't even have 3 full-time staff in our office. And every single hour of staff time could be used for basic administration. But on top of that, we also look at a whole host of different projects, development of the profession across kind of accreditation, registration, you know, kind of contributing to public health, as well as all the things we've been doing around kind of the international arrangements and setting up the examination that's both kind of national and international as well, which has been incredibly challenging. Other things obviously we have to deal with as well. We deal with kind of complaints and issues. So although we accredit institutions, we still get complaints from staff, members of the public, students that we have to actually deal with as well, which obviously takes up a lot of staff time. If we think about kind of registration as well as looking at kind of fitness to practice, which is kind of one of our main aims of concern from a financial perspective, because obviously we want to both kind of minimize those and protect the public at the same time. We also do a lot of other work around kind of registration, which is about, you know, how we deal with complaints, how we mediate, how we set up our processes and our frameworks, you know, how we communicate with other bodies. All of that is incredibly, incredibly important, and also quite time consuming as well. We as an organization now, we've gone from, as I say, this small group of individuals writing out kind of these plans for this membership organization to actually NHS England approach me now, Health Education England approach me now to work on national projects looking at kind of workforce planning for the future and trying to involve us as a profession in what's happening and developing in the UK from a healthcare perspective. So we really have changed as an organisation, and we're involved in lots of really, really kind of exciting projects, including where we can utilise our skills in areas that weren't originally or kind of considered to be one of our kind of main areas. So say, for example, if we look at pulmonary rehabilitation, not traditionally kind of one of our core areas by any stretch of the imagination, but our assessment skills, our exercise prescription skills, our skills at dealing with patient populations with multiple comorbidities makes us a really valuable member of that workforce there. So that's something else we're looking to kind of develop in a number of different areas where we can utilize our existing education and professional skill set to actually kind of help improve the health of the UK, and obviously kind of hopefully kind of worldwide as well. Other stuff as well, the examination is a really interesting one actually. We never wanted to do the examination just so people could go and work in America, or people from America could come and work with us. We also wanted to use it developmentally. So we want to get our institutions more involved with us as a body as well. So we can help develop the knowledge base for our profession, help refine that, help define it so it's nice and clear. And also start to pick up where we might have issues from an educational perspective or at institutions, so we can actually deal with that before we later on have problems with registrants, members of the public, and public harm. So it's kind of a long journey, and we're starting to look at this from the very, very beginning, and we're hopefully going to change what happens in the future. And that's incredibly, incredibly important. It's one of the reasons we put so much effort into this kind of registration exam and this international arrangement. It's worth noting, we are the only member of the international arrangement partners that does not charge a very large fee for this registration exam. We are absorbing that cost. And that's one of the things we've always tried to do, is make sure that our registrants get a huge amount of value for everything, from everything that we do. Now, on that note, it's really worth noting that we are desperately understaffed from a workload perspective. We're carrying out work across a whole variety of domains. We have to take part in all these projects to actually progress the profession. So we definitely need to expand our staff over the coming years. This year, we were definitely looking to actually put our registration fees up. When we've sat down and we've actually considered carefully the stress of the cost of living crisis and everything else that is going on at the moment, we've decided to hold off for another 12 months before raising registration fees. But after that, we will definitely need to be putting kind of registration fees upwards. As I say, we cover too many areas, and it is a struggle to cover a lot of our costs and continue the development we have at the moment. So that will be something for the future. On a similar note, we had to look at kind of cost cutting as well to an extent. So things like the British Journal of Sports Medicine, which was very kind of underutilized, we're only going to have that for another 2.5 months or so, and then we'll be discontinuing that subscription. And that money will be going into all our other projects, including our educational resources, webinars, and things like that. In the future, the door's always open for us to kind of go back into that, because I'm stepping down as one of the assistant editors as well, but the door will be open to go back into that if we ever did want to, and it doesn't preclude us looking at other similar kind of arrangements in future with access to kind of journals. So that's something we'll look at in future. Regulation is a really interesting one, and that's changing a lot in the UK, and I'm sure you've seen on the news quite a lot talking about how regulation is kind of changing and the challenges faced by regulatory bodies. We are one of the few kind of organisations that's gone through PSA accreditation, and we've met all their standards continuously since 2013. There are not many bodies like us in the UK, including the statutory regulators, who quite often fail to meet the PSA standards. On that note as well, the PSA ask us to help other bodies who are aspirant bodies to the accredited register scheme. So we frequently find ourselves kind of sharing good practice and frameworks and what we've actually kind of done, certainly over this last decade, which is incredibly important. And we've also done a recent blog on the changes to Standard 1. One of the issues with the PSA accredited register scheme, or one of the challenges it faced before, was not providing kind of the evidence base for different professions. And now each profession has to do that as part of their accredited register status, and we have been one of the first to successfully go through that process, providing the evidence base for our profession, and actually kind of demonstrating that we are an evidence-based healthcare occupation. And what I'll do as well, let me stick in the chat a little link if anyone wants to have a look at the blog I've just done for the PSA. Jump on the link a bit later and you'll be able to have a little read of that, and then you can follow the various kind of links there. Regulation is changing, and it will change for the better for us as well going forwards, and the PSA are certainly looking to kind of reform how everybody sees regulation, and that includes organisations and professions like ours who hold an accredited register. So there's lots of really, really exciting things happening for the future that we're looking forward to, not just limited to things like kind of tax, but also recognition across the NHS, for example. But that's already starting to get out there. And the NHS, as I say, are actually starting to knock on our door as opposed to us trying to constantly knock on their door. So that's just kind of a bit of an overview and our journey really in the last 2 decades. It's quite an amazing journey from, as I say, a very, very kind of small group of individuals to an internationally recognised profession. And we have lots of work to do, but we're going to stick to doing what we've always done, which is always trying to do the right thing to look after both our registrants and members of the public, and make sure we always put those values first before any kind of organisation aspirations, and that's really important. Can we scroll on to the next slide, please? Okay, so this is our accounts for the year ending December 2021. Obviously, we are a little bit behind in our accounts. We always have been because of the data, our AGM. The accounts for this year won't change a huge amount, although we have spent more this year setting up the international arrangement, setting up the exam, some of the legal advice we've had to have as well. There's been quite a lot of extra kind of costs over these last kind of 10, 11 months or so. So next year will be down a little bit, but not a huge amount. When we look at obviously kind of income for 2021, you'll note we've actually taken in quite a bit more, but we've also spent quite a bit more. Wages are obviously kind of a really big cost, along with a whole host of other kind of travel expenses, you know, kind of office type costs, banking, accountancy, legal, and obviously kind of business expenses. But obviously kind of wages, salaries and other staff costs take up quite a lot of our income, which you can imagine if you think about as well, it's not just us, it's a whole host of different kind of people who get paid for different functions within the organisation, whether it's kind of accreditation or whatever else that might be. Can we have the next slide, please? Just a little bit more detail about some of the accountancy and legal fees and professional standards authority, kind of subscription fee as well, or accredited register fee. And if we scroll on to the next slide, and this is probably kind of the most important slide here, which just gives us a bit of information about our funds at the moment. So we have, we usually try to operate above £300,000. And for the size of our organisation, don't forget this has to be able to cover any kind of catastrophic issues. So say, for example, we have paid over the last 2 decades millions of pounds in insurance premiums. But some of the big claims in the healthcare sector, in the musculoskeletal healthcare sector, have exceeded £4 million this year. And some of those were around things like kind of manipulation of the spine. So a big claim like that would be incredibly hard, obviously, for us to deal with from an insurance perspective. So we need to have a big reserve of funds. Our insurance renewal is due in January. So if we have any issues or any problems, we need to try and make sure we keep this big reserve there. Same goes for fitness to practice. If fitness to practice processes go beyond the early stages, they become very, very expensive. And that is something we need to prepare for the future. And those are our 2 biggest challenges that we can't actually anticipate. At the moment, from a profession perspective, we are one of the professions in our area with the lowest number of insurance claims. and one of the lowest, as I say, fitness to practice and complaints from kind of other practitioners. So that is testimony to all of you, which is incredibly, incredibly important, you know, that you're supporting the profession. And next slide. That's just another kind of summary. I won't go through kind of everything there, but it gives more details of, you know, kind of where we spend money and what we spend money on. And you can have a look at that, as I say, on the recordings afterwards if you want to go through it in detail. And the next slide. And I think that's it. So just one more thing I just want to say really is just how important you all are. It doesn't matter how many of these kind of national workforce groups we go to. It doesn't matter how much work we do with, you know, kind of Health Education England, NHS England, unless, you know, you step up and you do a brilliant job from a clinical perspective. And that's what you are all doing. Our registrants are, you know, making a tremendous difference in the UK. And it is absolutely amazing to hear all the fantastic things that you're doing. And we rely on you as well from a voluntary perspective. So, you know, we've started, obviously, we've got the exec committee, which has always been kind of our core, but we've now got all the link officers, and hopefully we'll be kind of expanding that as well going forwards and have a lot more kind of diversity, have a lot more kind of inclusion and voices from a whole host of different backgrounds, not just from kind of sport, not just from kind of private practice, but from a whole host of kind of working environments. And that's incredibly, incredibly important. You know, we only survive because of you, the volunteers. We couldn't do any of this without you as registrants and without you as volunteers actually helping us. So thank you very much. And it's been, as I say, it's been an incredibly exciting year. And thank you very much, everyone. And that's me.
Okay, so that passes back to me for the final bit, the good bit. Each year we present 2 awards to 2 students that have done exceptionally well. The first award being the Greybrook Prize, which is a prize of £500 to the student that achieved the highest overall percentage grade across their course. It says undergrad. If you skip to the next slide, Ollie. It says undergrad there, but it's also postgrad as well. And that will be presented to Matthew Dicker, who is from the University of Northampton with an overall percentage score of 84%, which is a fantastic achievement. I don't think Matt is with us on the AGM tonight, but I will be in touch with Matt to send him a certificate and organise the transfer of the £500 award fee. If we skip to the next slide, Ollie. The next prize is for the Bill McLaughlin Award, which is not necessarily for academic achievement, but for contribution to sport rehab. And just give a brief summary of the entry that has been chosen, which goes to Joe Asher of University of Nottingham. I believe Joe is with us tonight, so well done, Joe. Joe, throughout his degree, got involved with some of the COVID testing that was necessary at the time, alongside the doctors and the medicine students, which is a great bit of work. He also got stuck into the helping of students and recruiting for the program, talking about what's the difference between sport rehab and physio, and also, and this was probably the bit that got him the award, is working with the Nottingham Rehab Gym on the neurological side of rehab and working with neurological conditions and neurological patients, and really working hard to get that experience there. So a massive well done to Joe. Again, I'll be in touch with you, Joe, to organise payment and to get your certificate over to you. So a fantastic achievement. Well done, Joe.
Thanks, everyone. That does bring us to the end of committee reports. So if people do have questions, please feel free to either post them in the Q&A, or we can use the raise hand function if you'd rather just come on and ask us.
I'll answer the question in there about university teaching different in terms of content on their modules. How the registration exams going to be standardised across universities? Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's something we're actually kind of doing this year. So there's three kind of separate main areas we're trying to kind of utilize. Number one is we're getting people from every institution, or we should have people from every institution helping to write all the questions and putting that into the kind of question bank. Number two, we're wanting to get people from each institution as well on the actual panels who review the various questions and the areas of the questions to see for appropriateness. And then the final thing we're actually going to kind of bring together from that, we're also going to go through kind of a sense check and identify question areas. So obviously not the questions themselves, but the question areas to clarify whether all of those question areas are taught at institutions. So that is something we're going to be kind of working on to try and refine exactly what's being asked from a registration exam perspective and make sure it is standardized across universities, so no universities are disadvantaged just because they learned some slightly nuanced, kind of material. So there's some areas obviously that are more problematical. So say, for example, sports psychology is especially challenging for that. So we will need to work hard to try and refine this over the next few years. But an excellent question.
We don't have any other questions at this stage, but one thing I did neglect to do in my registrar's report was just give a special mention to Serena, who's one of our link officers, who very kindly became my guardian angel by taking away the responsibility for hosting webinars from me, and has done a fantastic job of taking over those since. So unfortunately, she's not with us this evening, so she'll have to catch this on the recording if she makes it to the end. But I just wanted to put my thanks to her on record because she's been brilliant.
Don't forget, if you've got questions you think of at a later date, please feel free to contact us. We're always happy to hear from you. And hopefully we're going to have an amazing 2023.
We are seeing a few people leaving now, so I don't know if Al or Holly, we can hand it back to you to wrap us up.
Yeah, I don't mind jumping back in quickly just to finish off. If there's anything else that we need to say at all after this, then obviously just jump on. Yeah, so just from me, just to obviously thank you to everybody for attending and coming and spending your time to catch up and learn a little bit more about what's been going on. And obviously thank you from myself to everybody that's involved from a BASRaT perspective and the work that everybody puts in to try and take us forward and improve everything that we're doing. So just a big thank you, and I'm sure that's there was definitely a Q&A in there that also echoed those sentiments as well. So thank you to everybody. But I think if there's no other questions, or there's something's just popped in the Q&A, that's just Samantha saying thank you. Thank you, Samantha. So thank you. And again, if anybody would like to be involved or help out, or anything that anybody feels that they can be of use to us, then please do get in touch, as Steve mentioned. Unless there's any other sort of last housekeeping bits, Hall, then I think we're good to go. So thank you very much, everybody.